FZ-07.
Long-term review.
I'm gonna turn a wrench. This makes me customize it.
Well, the weather sucks. It's crappy and cold and keeps raining. What a better time to sit down in my garage and talk to you about this good old FZ-07 or MT-07 if you're in another country, or soon to be MT-07 in this country, or already is. I don't know. It's a swell old bike. The end. Yeah, I've had the bike now for, what, 13, 14 months? Put 3,600 miles on it. I want to give you my thoughts of owning this bike for a little over a year now and putting that many miles on it. If you are interested in seeing more about the mods, kind of an overview of the mods and how I think that, changed the bike, I would say go check out the progress report video, as well as just the entire FZ-07 Bolt on series playlist. It's gonna have everything we've done to this bike and sort of in-depth reasons as to why I chose this modification, that modification. This video I just want to be more focused on my thoughts of this bike and whether should you buy one or not. I don't know, because I feel like that's what a lot of people would be watching that thinking this. First of all, my experience, if you don't know who I am, my name is Jake. I've been riding since 2004. I started with sport bikes. My first bike was an R6 and I had an R1. Ended up getting into supermotos because they were cheap. I've got a WR450 right here that's street legal. I owned a Grom for a while right before buying this thing, and so I've had very fast bikes, I've had very hooligan bikes. I'm also a certified mechanic.
Aren't you glad Jake's a mechanic? I went to school!
Just through that, I've thrown my leg over I don't even know how many motorcycles. I've ridden a little bit of everything. And I have this bike, which I think most people would regard as a beginner bike, and I think it's flipping awesome. It's a cheaper bike, right at that $7,000 mark. There's some good and bad to that. It's a little bit of do everything sort of bike. It's not great at any one thing. And I say do everything, I don't mean like hardcore off-roading or hill climbing or anything like that. You can ride with the sport bike, guys. You could take it on a trip. You could ride it daily to work. Try to do some light adventure riding. This is a 2016 with those wild yellow rims. They look amazing when they're clean. They do not stay clean. I mean, they get dirty within seconds. The motor is just torquey and snappy though. The best I can describe it is it's more like this than it is like a normal street bike. It's like a 450 single the way it generates torque and power, but it has a little more when you rev it out. It doesn't quite fall on its face. It still doesn't have a lot of top end. You ride this thing with anybody with a 600 and if they're absolutely just whacking up the throttle and going, it's not going to hang with it. But without experiencing it, this is always hard to explain to people. You have a lot of people who are looking into getting into riding or who just got into it or only into the sort of sport bikes and stuff, and in their mind, you just have to keep going to the next bigger, faster bike. The grunty torquiness of it, combined with the wheelbase and everything else, it is fun. It is a fun bike to ride around. 600, especially 1,000, you're pinning that thing. The pull it has is incredible. But it's also really, it's dangerous. It's hard to use it. I used to just beat on my R1 when I had one. Luckily, I'm not dead. This bike is more fun than crazy screaming horsepower. I'll give you an example. B-Rad, if you know who B-Rad is. Wheelie pretty much anything, scrape the tail. He's more talented rider than I am. He has, or had an FZ-09. We were riding around and this guy had he'd have to put his FZ-09 in like low power mode. And it was just very touchy, it's hard. It was hard for him to hold a good wheelie on it. He jumped on this, immediately just did a balance point wheelie at about 15, 20 miles an hour. It was just boom, just did it. And that's what this bike is so much easier to do on. Surprisingly, it doesn't have any kind of harsh vibrations for stumpy and grunty as it is. My bars are actually solid mounted. I've ridden SV-650, the new Ninja 650 bike, which would be the same as the Z650. They don't have, this is a better motor, it just is. If you have some control, you can easily buy this bike and use it as a beginner. One of the sort of key points of this bike that matches with the engine so well, this is a very flickable, very agile motorcycle, but it's not necessarily a good high-speed motorcycle. Where like a crotch rocket, for instance, almost gets very stiff. The faster you go, almost better the geometry of the bike works to hold that bike very stiff and very centered. This thing gets a little twitchy at high speeds. The wheelbase is very short. The fork angle is very steep. It's very easy for this bike to pitch into a turn. It also only weighs 390-something pounds stock. It feels fine. I don't want you to get the wrong impression that it's twitchy at highway speeds. even up to 100 miles an hour, I think this bike's pretty stable. I'm saying once you start going like 120 or 30, I think I've had this bike up to about 130. It does, you gotta be careful. Geometry that makes it fun at low speeds works against it at high speeds. And that's something, you know, when a motorcycle manufacturer builds a bike, they're gonna have to think about that. They have to decide, you know, where am I going with this machine? What's it doing? I think Yamaha really nailed this engine to this chassis. It's a great combination. You notice there's not a lot of people that are 5'11". You have people that are 5'10" and people that are 6 foot. And there's a reason why. It's because when you're 5'11", you just go and pretend you're 6 foot. So I'm 6 foot. I'll show you how I fit on this thing. No problem getting on it from the other side. On a weird sort of plasticky. It's just that this isn't the actual shape of the tank. The tank is actually really little underneath here, and all this plastic is just facade, which I don't mind having plastic covers over the tank. That's fine. That means, you know, the tank's kind of protected under this, which definitely costs less than a whole metal tank with paint on it cost if something were to happen. But they could have made this tank a good bit bigger, and that's my bigger complaint. This is a pretty small tank. You're getting maybe a little over 100 miles per tank, and you got to fill up, and that does suck. If you want to road trip this thing, which I haven't done yet, I plan to at some point here, but if you're going to, you need to keep that in mind that you have to stop pretty regularly to get fuel. I think the stock bars, I want to say they're up a little higher but narrower, so you might be a little more like this. But with my arm length, I actually find this quite comfortable right here. Not too bunched up. These T-Rex sliders here actually make good little, like this is normally how I'm going down the highway, kind of like this right here. And it's pretty comfortable. There are some issues. Part of that is this seat, the way it comes in like this. The seat still gets very narrow right here and really dips in pretty low. And I think they did that knowing that a lot of people were gonna buy this as their first bike, as a beginner bike. They wanted to make it very easy, not only so it's got a low seat height, but by bringing it in narrow, it really lets you get your feet on the ground. I mean, as you can see, my height, I have no problem at all touching the ground. So for me, I would love to see the seat maybe a little bit taller, a little bit kind of wider in this section. Back here is actually fairly comfortable. If you sit on a more flat spot on a long distance, it does sort of have this tendency to make you sort of slide forward into it. And of course, like most stock seats, it's very slick. It doesn't really hold you on the seat very good. Also, a little side note here, this back trunk here, you see mine, you can move a little bit if you try, but it stays pretty firm. Stock, this thing was all, I mean, I'm not kidding, probably had an inch side to side play in it. These tabs right here, they just aren't holding the little piece underneath it on the frame very well. So if you just get some duct tape, and if you're cool like me, you'll use black duct tape. Keep putting little strips on there and eventually it'll get snugged up. Not a big deal, but it is sort of silly when you buy a brand new motorcycle and the first thing you gotta do is bust out duct tape to fix your loose seat. These things are not adjustable down here. You can't like make more tension on it by raising these slightly. It's just a bit silly. I almost want to take the duct tape off to show you, but you just have to take my word. This whole thing would move and made a terrible, just cheap, crappy noise stock. The fit and finish of the bike, it's got some weird plasticky noises under here. It is like a $7,000 bike. There's some places you kind of go, yeah, it looks a little chintzy here and there, but you really got to nitpick it. Some of the things that carry over from it being so cheap is like the stock exhaust, for instance, all one piece. So unless you want to like take your exhaust off and cut it, you're gonna have to buy a full exhaust. Two Bros made me an exhaust. Heard it compared next to like Yoshimura's, Aquapovic. I've heard pretty much next to everything M4. This definitely, all the other ones are a little bit more tingy sounding and they're like louder slightly, but a little bit more tingy. And minorly though, the Two Bros is definitely the bassiest of the bunch. I've ridden other FZ-07s now with mods on it. People always seem to want me to throw my foot over theirs and take it for a spin and see what I think. I always feel bad as I come back and tell them like, yeah, you need to tune this thing, it's terrible. But all these people will throw exhaust on the bike and not tune it, and I swear you're losing power. And I'll tell you the simplest way I've noticed is that when this bike is completely stock in first and second gear, it'll just throttle wheel. You don't have to even tug, you don't have to do anything. If you just pin the throttle in first and second at the right RPM, boom, she'll stand it right up, and you can clutch it up in third. Once these guys put exhaust on them, I mean, I'm having to clutch up second gear wheelies. The bike is just losing crazy response. And that has to do with tuning. You gotta tune these things when you throw exhaust on it. You also notice my exhaust headers here, if you can see them, very sort of bronze looking. That's a good indication that I'm not running super lean. You see a lot of these guys' exhausts are just white and chalky looking because they're way too lean. If you're gonna go with exhaust, I always say just save up and wait till you can also do the tune at the same time. I think these flashing the ECU is always the best option. If you go watch the video, I really kind of dig into why I think that is. And the kit I bought lets you do it yourself at the house. I actually have a little piggy tail right under the seat here. I can plug into my laptop whenever I want and make changes. It's damn reliable. I can't, you know, it's a Yamaha Japanese motorcycle. I'm not actually that brand loyal. I know I have 2 Yamahas and I'm literally wearing a Yamaha hat. I just buy what I think is a good deal at the time. And I still say in the class that this bike fits in, it's probably still the best one there is. I see a lot of people in the comments thinking like, they say the FZ-07 is basically a supermoto. You want to take it on a supermoto ride? I've done that. No, you can't go everywhere, and you're gonna be that guy that showed up with a street bike on a supermoto ride. I say that's quite a mistake. I think if you're gonna road trip this thing, throw some bags on it, I don't see why you couldn't. You just gotta keep in mind, small gas tank. It's kind of like going to like a Chili's or something, this bike. It's not great at any one thing, I would say, because you always be able to point to another bike. If I say, oh, this bike does wheelies well, you can always say, well, your supermoto or your WR right behind it here is gonna do wheelies easier and better. Okay. You know, it's a good everyday bike. Well, there's probably, you know, some kind of half-adventure bike or like a 150, 250cc scooter with a way bigger trunk, gets way better mileage, goes way further on a tank, and is very nimble, more nimble than this in tight traffic. You know, but my point is, there's always something you can point to, and I think you see a lot of that, especially like I'll notice in the comments. You know, there'll always be someone saying, yeah, but you know, this bike is better and that bike is better. That bike is better at certain things. I'm looking at this bike as kind of an overall package, and I think that's how you gotta look at something like the FZ-07. Perfect world, maybe I own 5 or 6 motorcycles and kind of have all my bases covered, you know, for extreme in this direction, extreme in this direction. Like a lot of people out there don't have 6-7 motorcycle money, and when you can buy one bike that's relatively cheap anyway and get away with a lot of different riding, I think that speaks well to this thing. When you talk about a budgeted bike, where are they gonna skimp out on that's pretty important, you know, like if they skip out on and slap a motor from something else in it that sucks or isn't quite right, that's not gonna be as fun. Or if they build the thing just to be way heavy for some reasons, like a 500-pound motorcycle, well then you're always gonna be dealing with that. They did chose to go a little bit cheaper on the suspension. It's not terrible. When you see certain motorcycle magazines or testers like this do reviews of it, it seems like a lot of them are in Southern California. And I know the roads they're going up. I've been on them now. They're amazing. They kind of just take the bikes there and call it their sort of real-world test. Right here where I'm at in northern Texas, we don't have anything near as cool as twisty road-wise, but we do have some fun roads out here to go and hit. And when I'm back here on the real roads, what I call my real-world sort of roads, they're not that smooth, man. Blacktop roads with bumps and waves in them and gravel. I'm not saying the suspension is perfect, but I see their point in it. It does work well for that kind of stuff. It does soak it up and lets the bike travel pretty comfortably down some not terrible roads, but they're bumpy, rough backcountry roads. I do think there's room for improvement. Seeing some sort of adjusters and clickers on here would be nice. There's nothing. The good thing is there's a lot of aftermarket on this bike, and that is something I want to do. I want to put either maybe emulators in this bike or drop-in cartridge kits. I don't think you need to do an entire fork swap. When you are pushing this bike hard through a turn, it doesn't have that great of feedback. It's kind of neutral, kind of numb on the front end, and a big part of that would be one is the tires. The tires that come stock on this bike, I don't think they're terrible tires. I think they were for a certain purpose. They're Battleax MT-07? Yeah, something like that. I mean, it says right here on the tire, it says Sport Touring. Is a sport touring tire, I'm sure, is a good sports touring tire. They've actually held up pretty good. I'm surprised. I've done a lot of burnouts on the rear and I need to replace that one. But you know, it's a sport touring tire. I want something that's a little more grippy. It's gonna wear out faster, but I'm happy to have that for that translation of road to rider sort of feeling you get. If you're looking for a very specific bike to do a very specific thing, there's probably always a better bike out there. If you're looking for a bike that can really be a lot of bikes for you in one, that's where something like this comes in really good. There's something too to be said about having a bike that's more affordable, a little bit cheaper. It's not that you'll just abuse it because it's cheap, but you won't feel bad about riding it the way you want to ride it. I was thinking a weird way, like, is it really more fun to have like a GT Mustang or like a Corvette? Maybe the Corvette's more high performance and everything else. This is not like a perfect analogy, but just kind of hear what I'm saying here. you know, the Corvette, you know, you may, oh, it's bad weather out, or that road's kind of rough, I don't know, or it's a Mustang, whatever, you know, you're not gonna care as much because it's a Mustang, and then you have more enjoyment out of the Mustang than you do the Corvette, unless you're Dan and you wreck it. That's, I guess, the best I can say for a long-term review, what I think of this thing. Oh, another thing, the dash is annoying to look at while you're riding. You really gotta look down at it.